Hi, everyone. Welcome. And on behalf of the Digital Research Alliance of Canada and the National Training Expert Group, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the first session in our series on open educational resources in RDM. So today, with the help of our panelists and moderators, we'll be providing an introduction to the series and to open educational resources, or OERs, by highlighting 4 resources that will be discussed in more detail in future sessions, followed by a facilitated discussion around these important materials for training and learning in RDM. I'll also note that simultaneous interpretation is available and may be selected by the interpretation button on your Zoom panel. And you can ask questions through the Q&A, and we will have a Q&A, a moderated discussion followed by a Q&A at the end. But before we get underway today, I would like to begin our webinar with an acknowledgement that I'm speaking to you from Halifax, Nova Scotia, which is situated on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. It's important that we continuously work hard to understand the long history of these lands and recognize what those histories mean for the truth and reconciliation ahead of the Alliance and the DRI ecosystem as a whole. And I encourage you to take the time as well to learn about the lands that you call home and think about what you're doing personally to advance reconciliation in Canada. So we continue to the proceedings of our session today with the acknowledgement of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis nations and communities who have been harmed by colonial and unethical research, and of the data sovereignty and research priorities of these nations and communities. We commit to understanding and taking up the Alliance's role in reducing harm and advancing reconciliation in research. Additionally, Alliance webinars and meetings are governed by our Code of Conduct, which states that we seek to provide a welcoming, engaging, and safe community, and that discriminatory language of any kind or harassment will not be tolerated at our meetings, with harassment being understood as any behavior that threatens another person or group or produces an unsafe environment. So with that, it's also my pleasure to introduce our moderators for today's session. So we have Nick Rochlin and Jen Abel. Nick is a research data management specialist with the University of British Columbia's Advanced Research Computing team. And Jen is a research data management librarian at the University of Calgary Libraries and Cultural Resources. Collectively, they co-chair the Alliance's National Training Expert Group for RDM. And so with that, Nick and Jen, I'll hand things over to you to get us started.
Great. Thanks so much, Lee. I'm just noticing in the chat there are some folks saying they aren't able to access the slides, so we will get that sorted out for you quickly. So stay tuned. That will happen very soon. I will say that there isn't going to be a lot in the slides other than what you have just seen, but good to have those available anyway. Yes, so why are we here today? Well, over the last couple of years, many different institutions and groups across Canada have begun creating open educational resources, or OERs, in the research data management space, the RDM space, independently of each other. And we at NTEG, the National Training Expert Group, have come to be aware of a lot of these and have even had the chance to help out with some of them. And since the introduction of the tri-agency RDM policy almost 3 years ago now, there's also been a growing need for training and education and awareness raising in the RDM space, which not all institutions have the capacity to provide or to create materials for in-house. So having other materials that are available to them can be really helpful. This today is going to be the first session in a series showcasing both the existing OERs that have been made and how they can be used and reused, as well as sparking conversation about potential new projects. We have representatives for 3 of the projects here today to talk about their resources and their experiences making OERs for RDM. For more details about all of these projects, as well as overviews of other OER projects in both RDM and digital research infrastructure more broadly, and how they're used and how you can use them, please join us for the other events in the series, which we'll have more information about for you in the coming days. So with that, let's start off by hearing from our panelists about who they are and what they're doing today. And we'll start off, I guess, alphabetically by first name. Let's go with Emily.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm pleased to be here. So my name is Emily Carlisle-Johnson. I'm a research and scholarly communication librarian at Western University, where my role really centers on open publishing writ large. So I support authors who are navigating their publishing options to help them find open access ways of publishing. I lead our open education program and grant program here at Western, and I also co-manage our open journal publishing platform and work with editors who publish their journals openly through our library. I'm here because I was a co-editor, along with a number of folks on this call, on the recently published open textbook, Research Data Management in the Canadian Context. And my co-editors are Liz Hill, Christy Thompson, and then on the French side of things, Danielle Denny and Emily Fortin. And I know many people on this call were involved in the project, whether as a peer reviewer or one of our many, many authors. But if you're not familiar, the textbook was really, as it says, a primer on research data management in the Canadian context. It featured 18 chapters over 5 sections covering the first principles in research data management, the Canadian context of research data management, some more practical chapters on working with data and managing various types of data, and then perspectives on research data management. And I won't say too much more except that the textbook was really created with the goal of being used in classrooms across Canada by instructors teaching in library schools, but also by librarians who might be teaching these topics or wanting to upskill in research data management. And we're pleased to see that over several months, it has been used for those purposes. So I'll drop the link in the chat for the resource and then turn it over to another panelist.
And that other panelist is going to be Eugene.
Thanks, Jen. I just wanted to, Jen, if you can open the chat for posting for the panelists, because I was about to post a link and I couldn't. I think Emily cannot to do that too. But as you do that, I will introduce myself. I'm Eugene Barsky. I'm a research data librarian in EBC. I have been in the EBC for almost 20 years now, in various roles, including administration. But in my current role, I serve as a research data librarian since 2013, and my work is to help EBC community, which is a very large school, more than 60,000 students, 10,000 faculty, with all needs for research data management. I'm here today, thanks Nick for fixing it. I'm here today to talk about the open educational resource that I just posted, that we introduced back in 2019, just before COVID. It's our open educational resource for Research Commons workshops. It's raw, it's live, it's really cool. We have more than 50 different workshops on research data skills, data analysis, data mining, data visualization, research data management, and more. All workshops are computationally reproducible, they're self-paced, they're step-by-step, all of the workshops using the same template. They use the same license, they use the same pedagogical approach to our materials. And we allow anyone who is interested in those workshops to match them, reuse them, contribute to them, and we contribute them back to to various communities, including library carpentry. And I'm looking forward to discuss it more in detail in a bit after my colleague Robyn introduces herself. Thanks.
Robyn, go nuts.
Thanks, Jen. So hi, everyone. My name is Robyn Stobbs. I'm the Research Data Management Librarian at Athabasca University. Athabasca University is a distance education institution with a physical location in kind of north central Alberta in the town of Athabasca. But we have students who are from Alberta nationally and internationally. the resource I'm here to talk about today is a research data management course that we created, a team of us created at our institution. I'm just going to throw the link in the chat as well as the access code. And we'll get into in some of the discussion later, some of the limitations around the platform we have used here. But you can access, it looks like you need to pay for the course. You do not, just please use the graduate free access code to get in. So the course that we created is introductory. It's a self-directed micro course, and it was a collaborative effort between our Faculty of Graduate Studies to contribute to their growing PD offerings for our graduate students and the library, and our graduate studies faculty is working on making those offerings available more broadly, not just to our institution. So the course contains 5 modules. There's an intro to the life cycle and principles of RDM, ethics and responsibilities, data documentation, data storage and backups, and data deposit. They're followed by a summative activity, but throughout there's a learning journal and questions to help bring people towards writing a data management plan. So I'll leave it there. Happy to continue to the discussion. And
All right.
yes,
Well,
Jane, you can absolutely share it. I see in the chat. Please go ahead.
yeah, I think all these are for sharing, which actually loops into this next question. And we're talking about OERs, open educational resources, but I thought it's so interesting that you all three have these very different resources that fall under this same label. So I wanted to start out by asking, what makes something an OER, and why did you choose to make your resources this way? And what value do you think it's adding to the community and to the greater ecosystem that you're adding to? So maybe we'll start with Emily on that one, going a little out of order.
Yeah, no problem. So first, what makes something an open educational resource? The definition that I use, just a practical definition, is something that is a teaching and learning resource that is both free to access and also carries permissions for sharing and reuse. And often that's through a Creative Commons license or some other kind of open license. And the other piece that I would add is, especially if you are assigning a license that does allow for adaptation, then also making the resource available in a format that others can make edits to, make a copy and then make edits to. So why did we choose to make our resource an open educational resource? I'll say I can't take credit for that. I think I came on to the project after it was already identified that an open textbook was going to be made. And that idea, I think, might be credited to Lachlan McLeod at Dalhousie University. But I think really the idea behind that and wanting to do it was for a couple practical reasons. First, to make the textbook free for students so that they wouldn't have to purchase a textbook if they're in a class that was using it. I think another practical reason was also being able to then kind of self-publish the resource, not having to go through a publisher. And then also the ability for others to use and adapt the resource as they want. So to make a copy of the textbook and then delete chapters that aren't relevant, or be able to make updates because it is an ecosystem that's constantly evolving and changes are being made, new policies are being created that we might want to reflect in the book. So that ability for people to then take it and really treat it as a living resource and customize it for their needs. And then I think something that we talked about throughout the project too was really the values piece of it. So the textbook talks about open data and sharing. And so we wanted the resource itself to really embody the spirit of what the community values, what the community believes, and what's being talked about in the textbook itself.
Okay, that's great. Love hearing all that and totally agree. Now I know that the definition of an OER might be similar with all of you, but I'm going to pass that same question to Robyn. Say, what makes something an OER and why did you choose to make your resource an OER?
Awesome, thanks, Nick. So gonna kind of echo Emily's definition. The importance with an open educational resource is that other people can take it and reuse it. That was a key aspect here. For AU, we also wanted to create an online asynchronous course that was something that could be reusable because we are a distance institution. So the format we chose also works well for our student body in that they are enrolled in asynchronous distance courses. But also a key piece for us as we are going through thinking, there's a lot of effort going into making this. We're dedicating time. We got our Associate Vice President Research, got our faculties to support funding for the project. We wanted to make something that would be useful for other institutions, and we are a smaller institution. So if we've put something together and put this time in, we really wanted it to be something other places could take and use as they see fit and potentially adapt to their own institutional contexts. So that was a key part of our decision-making process there.
Okay, great. And yeah, lastly, Eugene, I don't know if you want to repeat things that have already been said, but I know that there's been
Absolutely
a lot
not.
Yeah. And so with that said, you can talk about why you made it, but maybe moving forward to that, I know that you chose GitHub as the platform to develop your OER on. And what went into the selection of that platform, and would you choose it again?
Well, it's excellent question, and the multiple angles to take it on. So we had a situation. Back in 2019, we created a new unit in the library to provide research supports for the campus communities. And I was the administrator in charge of this unit, and the COVID happened. And then we had thousands of people interested to take our workshops on research data skills. We needed a hands-on resource, step-by-step resource that we could use to teach our workshops, things like Jupyter, things like Omeka, things like Unix, things like naming files, things like multiple things our newly created team was about to show and present. And we had so much interest. Our Zoom was not holding up. We had more than 120 people in the workshop. So we looked for tools that would be raw, that will allow us to do things fast, that will allow us to do things collaboratively. Usually in the libraries, we tend to use the software as a service tools, SpringShare, catalogs. We always try to find a tool that is licensed done by somebody else and managed by somebody else. We didn't like that. We wanted to do things on our own. We wanted to do things fast, and we wanted to do things kind of on a roll. And we understood that it will never be finished. It will always be work in progress, and we wanted to be able to work on it continuously with ourselves, with our team, and with our students. We had 18 graduate students at that time. We were really rich at that time, so we had money. So we wanted to have a tool where we can all collaborate. And we found this tool. And we use GitHub as a platform. It's free. It's Mashable. You can take the content as Vanessa just illustrated in the chat, Quebec. You can take the content, do whatever you want with it. We licensed it with CC BY. We tend to do that in the open software and EBC. We tend to license the content with CC BY, and we tend to license the software we release, and we have quite a lot of it as MIT license, which is also an open license. So we just tend to do those two. We wanted to contribute the content back to the community, including the library carpentries, which we have team members serving on the board of. In fact, my colleague Eka Grigorich is on the board, the chair for the library carpentry right now. So we wanted a tool that is easy enough to upgrade and maintain with the new and fresh content. And literally today, I was working on one guide because the prof has complained about the geospatial deposit guide and they didn't like something. So it will take me 16 seconds to change it. And I didn't have to ask for permission. I didn't have to ask anybody. And if I wanted, I would assign this to the prof itself, and they will commit. They could do it themselves, and they commit the changes back to the code. So it takes a team approach. It's a collaboration between librarians and graduate students. We have way less people now. We have way less graduate students. We have only 6 right now, down from 18, but we're still running a team. We're still updating the content. It allows us to keep the content fresh daily. it's a big thing. If we see a problem, we fix it right away. Yes, it's a commitment. It's it requires people to be on top of their material, but it also allows people to be on top of their material, which means allows them to be up to date with the content. Nick, you asked if you would choose it again. This is a loaded question. So again, as we are a large academic library, very conservative, in fact, like many academic libraries. It doesn't seem like it, Jen, right? But we are. So we tend to use the libraries in the libraries software as a service, like everybody else. We have LibGuides, we have LibInsight, we have this and that. So it usually requires an executive champion to take a tool, an open tool, a free tool, not a library comfortable tool, and to run with it. So at that time, I was that administrator. So it was easy enough for us to advocate for it and make a case. Would we be able to do it again? I don't know. I really don't know. We have some colleagues here, and I can see in an attendee list. I'll invite you to share your thoughts if it was a wise decision or if we would be able to do it again. I don't really know. We'll talk about the platforms when we get there, or if it's a right platform. What about the learning curve? Is it easy to use? I will wait for that maybe question, Nick, to get to the guts of the platform choice. But this is why we choose to use what we chose. Thanks.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Lots to unpack there. I'm looking forward to that next question. Maybe we'll pass this next question to Emily and talk about the platform you chose, why you chose it, and would you choose it again?
Yeah, so we chose Pressbooks to create our textbook. We knew we were creating a textbook even in the early brainstorming stages. And so Pressbooks is an open monograph publishing tool, so it can create a textbook in various formats, webbook format, also PDF format, also HTML. And I think Pressbooks came up because it was one that a couple of us in early discussions were familiar with. I'd been involved in publishing projects using Pressbooks in the past. I currently support faculty and instructors in using it in my role at Western. And it's a tool that in Ontario is free to every college and university through a consortium, eCampus Ontario, but I think is also free and accessible to a number of universities across Canada. So we were able to collaborate with people, add different people to our book, even if they weren't in Ontario, to build it that way. I think so beyond it being free and available to us, a couple other draws, in my experience, it has been pretty low barrier to entry. Like people are able to pick it up pretty quickly. It's similar to WordPress if you've used WordPress. So a number of us co-editors, some co-op students were able to get in there and really create the content, like add the content to it pretty seamlessly. Also, it is quite easy to make edits over time. I know that that's something Eugene was mentioning. So we were able to make edits to it over time. I think a couple other draws, you're able to add some interactive content. So we have a lot of graphics that that people had added in their chapters or created that we wanted embedded within the book. Some interactive activities, like I think true or false multiple choice questions are included, and we were able to really create those in an interactive way with Pressbooks. But also people are able to, if they have access to Pressbooks, really just like clone an instance of our textbook and start making edits to it themselves, which I think, going back to what we talked about in the previous question about wanting people to be able to adapt the resource, Pressbooks does enable that to be done quite seamlessly with access to the tool. So that was something that drew us to it as well. And I think those were the main points I wanted to speak to here. I think honestly, the maybe the biggest decision was that it was something that people were familiar with, and we didn't want to overcomplicate the project. So we stuck with a tool that some of us knew. Would I use it again? I mean, I would. I am. I teach workshops about Pressbooks in my current role, so it is something that I do support and teach people to use. I think it's all about matching the project to the tool that's able to do what you want it to do, though. So of course, if you're looking to publish an open book or something of that sort, then yeah, it is something I do recommend.
Okay, that's awesome. And then over to Robyn, who I've just kind of seen what it looks like with your platform. It was one that was new to me, so I'm interested to hear about platform, why you chose it, and would you choose it again?
Great, thanks, Nick. Yeah, so there's kind of two layers to our platform here. So for development and also what we're using for delivery. And there's some challenges and opportunities with both. We used Articulate Rise to create the course itself, which is a proprietary product and introduces a host of problems when you're trying to openly license and remix something. But it also presented opportunities for us because we already had licensed seats in the library. We were familiar with using it. And it allowed us to create a pilot project. We had a miniature version of the first module of the course ready that we could then present to faculty members and have them have a look at our Faculty Graduate Studies Council to get support for funding and further creation of the project itself. So our choice of tool was also what enabled us to move at the pace that we did to get something put forward to get funding within a particular fiscal year. We also then have a product that it is a course. It needs to be hosted on a learning management system if you want people to be able to enroll and get badges or credit for doing the course. So Articulate, you can just put it up as a web page and people can go through, and as long as you don't clear your cache and cookies, you will maintain your progress through the course. If you don't want that caching issue, you need to have it on an LMS. You also can get better statistics on who's using your course. So we are using PowerEd, which is a separate department at our institution that can be contracted to develop online course delivery. So that's our delivery platform. They're using Brightspace as the LMS, and we have a course there. So the link that I shared is to that course and the code you need to get in there. But if you wanted to remix it, you're probably going to need access to Articulate files. And that's the part that's missing on the site now. For how to get access, you need to contact me for that sort of part of it. So getting into, would we do it again? Yes, because we would want to co-locate other graduate professional development courses together as a larger part of our institution's program. So there's that trade-off there with what provides the most open form of content and what our institution has already established and we have access to that we're working within. Anyway, happy to answer more questions related to that because Articulate is an interesting tool, but it is proprietary and introduces its own challenges there. Thanks.
So I think that's a really good segue into what we were thinking of asking you next, which is, are there any challenges to making an OER or any barriers to entry? And Robyn, maybe we'll start with you if you don't mind.
Sure. Thanks, Jen. So the first one I wrote down as I made little notes for this question was capacity. We are a smaller institution and have multiple things on everyone's plate, which is the case at most institutions. So we had to ensure that both my counterpart in Faculty of Grad Studies and I had enough time set aside for our project year or when we had budget to be able to put this together. And we also needed a budget for design help because we knew we could get enough time to do the content creation, but not necessarily to implement it in some sort of shareable form. So it was a team of 3 who did the development. I did the RDM content. Corinne did all of the interviewing of researchers who are featured in the project and coordinated all of the budget and work with PowerEd. And then PowerEd also helped us hire a designer who did the actual implementation in their version of Articulate so that we did not have to do all of that as well. So capacity can be a challenge for trying to put a project at this scale together. We also had to understand our institution's intellectual property policy, which will vary from institution to institution. But so with our policy, administrative staff, which would be what Corinne and I are, don't own what we produce. The university owns what we produce. So we can't make the decision to openly license our output. The university has to make that decision. So we had to work out what the process was in order to get the appropriate approval to be able to openly license the project overall, which is something anyone putting together an open resource will need to consider is, are you the intellectual property owner? Because if you're not the owner, you cannot put the license on the project going forward. And we had to ensure we could get that approval before we went too far ahead, because we repurposed other openly available materials in the project and wanted to be able to contribute back to the community. And we couldn't then openly post something if we couldn't assign the appropriate license to it. So that was a big concern for us. And I just want to give a shout out to our OER librarian, Dan Coatcroft, who helped review our licensing statements before we posted everything at the end. So.
That's great. Thanks, Robyn. Emily, challenges, barriers.
I would echo a lot of what Robyn said, I think based on my own experience, but also I mentioned that part of my role is supporting open education and running the open education grant program at Western. And I would say that particularly those points around capacity, around funding, and around various areas of like knowledge and expertise that's required related to, for example, licensing and copyright, that resonates with me based on my experience working on the open textbook project that I'm talking about today, but also really is quite familiar to feedback I've gotten from folks that have applied for a grant and then executed a project, or taken a year longer than they said they would to execute a project of this scale. So certainly time, which I think the only way to really mitigate that is maybe getting rid of other responsibilities or giving yourself longer than you might anticipate needing. And then, yeah, I think funding was something, I guess in order to free up our time and not copy edit our textbook, we wanted to hire experts to do that, but of course had to have the funds to be able to pay those experts. So being able to find the funds for a project like this and write grants, because that is how we got funding, was time consuming in and of itself, but certainly worth it. And yeah, the areas of expertise, just needing various expertise, which I think bringing people with multiple perspectives to the table certainly helped us really fill in all the gaps that we needed.
Even though it meant coordinating a cast of thousands.
Well, and there you go.
Thousands of librarians.
Yeah.
Eugene, challenges, barriers in your case.
As you can see, we come from a different angle here. We wanted a platform that we work freely. We wanted the information to be free. We wanted the stuff to be available. We didn't want to be limited by any licenses. We wanted to create the content ourselves. We wanted to edit the content. We wanted to give the content back. We are not limited by any monetary frameworks at this time, and it allows us to do whatever we wanted with the content. That's good. That's the good part. The more challenging part is the skills. So of course, when you work with a software as a service, with the libguides, you actually don't need to know Cascadian style sheets. You actually don't need to know how to create tables in Markdown. Yeah, you don't. You just click the buttons and it works for you. So and it's a challenging thing. For 5 years ago, when we introduced our platforms to the community, we had the right people at the right time in the right place. So we had the people. We had 6 librarians who had the skills to work in the Markdown and GitHub, and for those librarians who were not super comfortable, like myself, we were able to bring them up to speed with that. So we peer trained each other. So once we created OERs, and we create them on daily basis, we literally worked on it yesterday. So we keep working on this content. We have encountered a hesitation from some of our colleagues in different units who wanted to work with us, but didn't want to learn the technology behind it. And again, it's not extremely sophisticated. Markdown language is not like it's not Python or anything. But it requires some investment of time, and there's a learning curve. And some of our colleagues didn't want to do that, or were not able to, and it remains a challenge. It does remain a challenge, and it does remain that only a very core team of librarians are still leading this work. Same librarians as 5 years ago. I don't think we have grown that much, but what we could grow is the students. So we cycled through dozens and dozens of students who learned the skills, were able to contribute to the content, check the freshness of the content, and went off to some great things, and we brought new students, onboarded them, and did it again and again and again and again. So we had a lot of excellent students that we released to the world with the skills, and I'm very proud of that because they have the right skills to the right place at the right time. Looking backwards again, as an administrator who introduced this approach, I do regret maybe for not going with a more intuitive program, because I would love to have more collaboration. We have 82, 83 librarians now in EBC. And when we introduced it, in my head, I thought, oh, great, we will slowly onboard people as our content library grows. So we have more than 50 workshops, and we keep it up to date. But those are not traditional library workshops. We actually never migrated the citation workshops. If you look at the catalog I posted, I have the citation workshops at the bottom. Ideally, I thought we will migrate the citations, the product workshops to this approach, and we were not able to, because we were never able to bring those folks up to speed. So it's a limitation that I would consider again if we had to go 5 years backwards and make a decision. But I think Nick, you asked me if we would do it again. I think we would still go with a free raw platform that allows us to do things live at any time, not being limited by a platform or a license or a payment that we have to make. So we will maybe work with a more established platform rather than GitHub. There are many like that, but it is what it is, and we keep running with it. And I'm pleased with the integrations we have seen of our content to the communities. We have quite a few, and today, again, on the chat, I learned about another one. So I'm very pleased to see how community adopts our content and reuses it, and sometimes contributes back. We have quite a lot of courses in EBC that decided to contribute back to our catalog, and we took those edits and introduced them into the content. Thanks, Jen.
That's great. And Eugene, I'm actually going to ask you a follow-up question, because we're doing our training on GitHub in the Okanagan too, and that same barrier to entry with colleagues, it is a thing, right? And you want it to be as open as possible. We've used the Open Science Framework as a tool as a bit less of a barrier to entry. I'm just wondering, what other tool would you use if you weren't using GitHub? Because you kind of hinted at potentially thinking of other tools. Is there something you had in mind, or is that just a more general thought?
There are tools, tools that take Markdown language and they allow you to work like this. There's intermediary tools that like editors into Markdown that allow librarians to create content without actually touching the complexity of creating like graphs in Markdown, like, or working on tables and things. Again, it's not super sophisticated, it's just different. It's just not clicking a button and say insert a link. You actually have to insert a link by hand. And it's, again, some of us who started librarianship in the 90s, we actually learned it. We actually know how to do it. but some people don't. So is there another specific tool? Would we choose the Open Science Framework? I don't think so. I don't think Open Science Framework is the tool I would choose over GitHub. I actually like the mashability of GitHub, that they allow any content to be linked to any content from any place to any place. It's cool. I don't think we can do it with any other tools that I know right now, because I know that some courses, for instance, take sections from our workshops, like especially in GIS. They just take pieces and integrate those pieces, but just import them into their courses. And as we update those pieces, they automatically update in their courses too, which is exactly what we intended to do with the idea of open education. We wanted the stuff to be constantly updated, live, and kind of interacting with each other. So Nick, to answer your question, no, I don't have a specific tool in mind, but I would love to ease on our colleagues to make things more comfortable for them. We haven't done that. I was not able to do that.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And GitHub, like you said, it makes beautiful web pages, and the embedding and interlinkages are fantastic. So we have our first audience question that I'm going to ask, and I think this is specifically geared towards Emily and Robyn, but I'm going to expand to Eugene maybe afterwards. But it's about costs, original costs, ongoing costs. If the license for Pressbooks expires, what happens to the book? And so I might guide that to Emily to kick us off with.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I can't speak transparently to the cost because at least in our case in Ontario, Pressbooks is provided to us for free through a consortium. I know some schools in Ontario do have their own instances of it, and so if there's anyone on the call that does, and you know what the cost of that is or what that looks like on your end, feel free to post that in the chat. But one of the reasons we used Pressbooks was because it was available to us and to colleagues at all colleges and universities in Ontario for free through a consortium. And I think that there are, at least in Canada, other provinces that operate on that model and have access to it for free through a consortium. If the license goes down, I believe that the Pressbook still exists. Although I think our ability to edit it going forward might eliminate. But now I'm like questioning that, so I'm going to have to look into it. But I guess that's why we export it in various formats, so that we always have a copy in another format and don't lose everything.
Build that RDM into it, get those versions up. Robyn, and in terms of your model, could you speak to the, initial costs, ongoing costs, sustainability?
So a lot of our initial cost went into being able to hire a designer and editor to help with the initial production of the project. And we were able to do that in some cases for a bit of a lower cost because of our partnership with PowerEd and our Faculty of Graduate Studies. AU hires editors for their online courses to begin with, so we were able to use some of those same contracts. And we were able, because PowerEd is now hosting the course, we have a schedule with them so that we can do regular updates to the course. So if the library was to reduce its seats in Articulate to not have a license, we still have access to PowerEd because that's a tool they use. And we have an agreement with them that they will continue to be there. So it's cost effective for us because our institution has that infrastructure in place. It is not potentially cost effective if we were to be hosting our own LMS to do so. And we don't do that for our library courses right now. So that would be a problem from that delivery angle. From the persistence of content for remixing, the piece that I'm working on right now is trying to get more persistent, less format dependent versions into our institutional repository of just what the content is itself that people could then take and repurpose for their own remixing. We're also working on remixing our own content into a new OER that will sit on a Pressbooks format, but that'll be somewhere in the next year.
Okay, great. And Eugene, I know that you used a free platform, but there was obviously costs with students and time. Could you speak a little bit to those initial costs? I think you hinted at it before, but just talking about how others might be able to copy this model or learn from it.
So we had the good times a couple of years ago. We had 18 grad students. That's a lot of people to train on the platform. Once we the way our research commons operated at the time was that each librarian is responsible for a team. So we would have a digital scholarship team, and my colleague Eka would be responsible for that team. She would go and train those students. Of course, we will pay for their training. And those are not library school students. They are coming from everywhere, from education to economics to computer science, from everywhere. We will train them on the tool, and then we will support them as they create content and offer content and educate themselves on the approach. Did it cost us a lot of money? Nah, no, it's not. I would say to get a grad student up to speed to a tool like that would take less than a week. But it's a skill they would actually take along in their studies and as they become academics. It's an excellent hands-on skill working with tools that are relevant in today's economy. So was it investment worthwhile? Absolutely. Like we definitely invested on those students, and we are happy to see them succeeding in the world. And many of those students actually, the library school students actually working as librarians. Some of them on this call. It's exciting to see them. But there is investment of money, not cash. It's investment of your student budgets. Is it significant? Not really. Is it useful? Absolutely. And if you could trade more and more focus on those skills, I think it will be beneficial in the long run for everyone. I taught my kids how to do Markdown in high school, and now they did beautiful presentations for the capstones, and it's amazing. It's really amazing. You don't have to worry about PowerPoint. You don't have to you don't have to place this image in this left corner. You just let the Markdown do it for you. You work on the content, you process that content, you parse it, and the thing is created. It's beautiful. It really makes a difference, and really made my own daughters being really interested in this field. And my oldest is studying data science now. So here you go. Thanks, Nick.
The next generation coming up through the ranks. Robyn, you were talking about the possibilities of remixing, and that's a really interesting fact that we're talking about with OERs. It's not just about making them free to anyone; it's making them remixable, mashable, etc. So our next question is: do you know if anyone, and it sounds like some of you do, if other folks have remixed or adapted or reused your work, and do you know how they're doing it? And maybe we'll go back to Emily to start.
Yeah, actually a couple of us on the, so Liz Hill and Christy Thompson yesterday, we were trying to track down like, who do we know of that has used this in the classroom? Who do we know of that's been using it in general? I don't think we have a comprehensive list by any means, but we do know some folks who have used the textbook in the classroom. I can't speak exactly to how they've used it, whether they've assigned every chapter, whether they've customized it, but I do know of one instance of a library in the United States had reached out to us, and they had actually asked, like, how can we go about customizing this for their context, the United States context? So they're doing so using Pressbooks. We gave them some instructions on how to clone the resource, and then begin making edits themselves. And I know that they are doing that. I think we've also seen the textbook at least linked to in a number of library libguides. So shout out to many of you on the call who I'm sure are responsible for that. And as we can see in the chat, we know Dalhousie used it, UBC has used it. So it is being used in classrooms. But beyond that one case where somebody explicitly reached out asking for instructions on how to resource or on how to remix the textbook, I can't say for sure how folks are doing that.
Thanks. Eugene, you mentioned you knew a few, but there were some that you didn't know. Do you know how many folks have been reusing your stuff, or it's just out there in the wild
It's actually quite a
reproducing?
lot.
Yeah.
If you look like from UVic to DAL, literally in everything in between, because people don't reuse the entire catalog. Obviously, they take pieces, and the only thing here's Jane says they're using it in Carleton, and I didn't know that. So yeah, and people take pieces. The only thing we say, just mention us, CC by us that we create this content, and that's again, once you release this information to the world, you don't have control, right? You have to rely on the goodness of your colleagues to cite you. But that was the idea. The idea was to create content that is dynamic. And what we haven't seen much, we have seen some, but not much, is contribution back to the content. So we would like to see much more of that. If you see, and I'm talking to you on this call to that, and this, if you see things that are not as relevant anymore, if the content is old and not as fresh, if it started to rot, just tell us, create a GitHub request, and we'll take care of it. Like we take care of our stuff. My RDM materials are up to date, literally on monthly basis. I update them. My student here, Billy, is here, or used to be on this call. She introduces a lot of icons and and smileys to this content. So if you don't like them, let us know. We will remove them. It used to be very dry. Or if you like them, let us know. We'll use much more of them. So again, this is the beauty of a free platform. We can do whatever we want, whenever we want, and we want to give back and receive back. Receive back is what we haven't seen much. It would be great to actually keep our stuff up to speed from your expertise. Would be great. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Eugene. And Robyn.
So with ours, there's a bit of the, I'm going to call it hiccup or piece with the fact that we've used Articulate makes it awkward. So I know UBC was investigating. I need to follow up with them on that because we were trying to get the Articulate. I know the process to get them access to Articulate. We just need to ensure that it's gone through. But others have been requesting the link, and can I share this? And yes, please absolutely share the link and the graduate free code. I need to get text up on the site telling people who to contact to get the code. And that's a limit of having it posted on the LMS, is you can only have so many students enrolled in one time on an LMS. There's a capacity limit. So that's their way of ensuring they don't go over the limit, is to have that code there. But we need to ensure people can get a hold of the code for general reuse. For the remixing, UBC is the only person who's contacted me to get copies of files so far, but I'm hoping that if we can put it up on our institutional repository, that'll make it more accessible for others. Because if you were to just, in theory, you could go in and try and copy and paste out of the live platform, but that's really awkward and not as usable as just having access to a repurposable file.
Okay, that's awesome. So I think we've got a couple of questions coming in here. I'm going to try to loop two together because I think that they're related. Danica had a question, and maybe this is a broad question for everybody in this room to think about, but looking down the road, what direction would you like to see us as a national network to take to coordinate and share these resources? And then Ryan had a semi-related question about the efforts made to engage professors and schools in OERs. And so I'd like to ask what you all think about that, and maybe starting with Emily.
I think I'll speak to the second one because that's something that I think about a lot just in my role as like kind of an open education librarian in general. So what efforts did we take in particular? I think word of mouth and just like the through the data community and through the listserv that we set up and other listservs, like word of mouth really, I think has been the most effective in engaging people and using this work in the classroom. But I think thinking about that at a higher level, like how do you engage people in open educational resources? In my experience, the most effective thing is similar, word of mouth, and like colleagues who are really champions for open education. So a call like today, where we're talking about, you know, the power of what we've created and how it's been beneficial and how we did it. But having that filter down into different pockets throughout universities, into different departments, having people who are really supportive of OER or who've used it and been really excited about it and can share things with their colleagues, I think that is really the most effective and powerful way of engaging people in this space. So I think in our roles, we can find those champions, or we can be those champions and share with others, or enable people to share with their colleagues.
That's awesome, right? That's the whole value of this thing. We want to get it out there. Eugene, do you have anything to add about, you know, how we might coordinate this nationally for sharing, how people might engage professors, other groups?
Well, we definitely engage professors. We have multiple classes in EBC actually completely adopting the GitHub approach for the textbooks, for instance. Instead of using Pressbooks, they wanted to use a GitHub for textbooks for forestry course, for instance. Some profs really liked it. Again, as I mentioned, we literally hear back from profs on a weekly basis because they either use our content. I'm doing like mechanical engineering later today. We use our content, and we are working with those profs to make sure the students are getting the skills that they need. Now, how do we see national approach? I always wanted. We have a variety of platforms right now in Canada for training RDM. Compute Ontario using their own platform was similar to GitHub, but not quite. There's a UBC one. There's quite a few. I would say maybe a handful of approaches. For years, I reached out to Lee and the Alliance with a request maybe to look into some kind of harmonization of the content. We'll decide on the platform, but what we could do, we could offer under the Alliance umbrella, maybe some kind of harmonized content for all DRI skills, including RDM. And that would be really neat and interesting to do. I raised it multiple times with the Alliance leadership too, most recently in their visit to Vancouver. And I see Jeff has done the same. He also thought, I think Jeff represents Compute Ontario, and they have their own platform, but it is behind it's like behind the login, if I'm not mistaken. It's not open to the world, while ours is. So there's quite a lot of conversations to have, but we have a potential to harmonize this approach and content, and this conversations that we're having right now. It's a great step towards it. Thanks, Nick.
Oh, lots to do. Jen, jot these notes down. We have to push intake forward. Robyn, what would you like to see with the national coordination or the way to engage professors, other groups?
I'll highlight that. So for the existing resource that we're here to talk about, NTAG actually did a peer review, and we went through and updated our content based on the feedback we got. I found that was very helpful, especially since it was a project by a small team at my institution. So it was really good to have other people review, and I really appreciated all of that feedback and the time people took to review all of the modules of content. So that I thought was great. For involving professors, depends on what kind of context, meaning at a local context. We have an OER librarian at our institution who is awesome and running another project to help profs create their own OER. I'm hoping that at a local level, we can also step up some of our communications with profs, because they're starting to hear about that program, and to have them know that, well, we have some other resources, but having been created by other units that support teaching and research, how can we get those more incorporated in courses? Because I know some of them who are aware of them have talked about wanting to incorporate into their thesis preparation courses, for example. But now how can we consistently build those connections, knowing that every faculty has different communications channels and potentially different structures for who you would contact to set that up. So that's our kind of practical next steps on a local level there, is to establish those connections.
Great. Thanks so much, Robyn. Recognizing that we are just about at time and people are starting to head out, we're going to wrap it up with one extremely quick question, which you can all jump in on if you would like, or if you'd just like to sit on what you've said. If you had one very quick piece of advice to give to someone who was thinking of diving into the RDM OER world pool, as it were, what would it be? Whoever wants to go first, or I'll pick on someone.
I can jump. One advice will be talk to colleagues, because somebody has done it before, and you are not the first one to invent the wheel.
I was going to say something very similar, Eugene. Find good collaborators, find people who've done this work and that you can lean on or work with. But for some original advice, I might also say, like, build flexibility in from the start. Like, give yourself more time than you think you might need, because it often, I think, we end up using or needing that time.
Yes, I'd echo that as well. I had noted down triple your timeline. Because things come up and potential for updates. So as a quick example, as we were finalizing our content to pilot it with a smaller set of students, the TCPS was updated and we have an ethics module, which we then updated after we'd done the peer review process before launching it more broadly. So it's just, think about your format and what type of updates you might need, because it may not be a single end date. You may need to have a phased kind of approach. Anyway.
An excellent way to leave things off. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Eugene Barsky from UBC, Emily Carlisle-Johnson from Western, Robyn Stobbs from Athabasca. This is just the beginning of this series. We will be talking in more depth about all of these resources down the road. Stay tuned in your inboxes for dates, topics, times, etc. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.